What is your favorite decade of college football? Mine is the 80s or 90s from Little Hocking, Ohio. Good people in Little Hocking. Big people in Little Hocking. Big hearts, at least. So the 1990s was going to be my initial answer here. But the more I thought about it, we got really in depth on this today. I think the 2000s is my answer. Obviously, I was not alive to, as a fully functioning adult or even kid, view the 1980s. I don't know, other than the history books, what the 70s were like. But I know what the 2000s were like. And I do remember the 90s too, obviously. But I know, I grew up, I came of age, if you will, in the 2000s. So here's what we had there. I'm going to make my argument. There's going to be a strong 1990s rebuttal, I know that. But my argument for the 2000s being the best decade for college football. We had 8 different national champs. LSU in 03 with Saban and 07 with Miles. They repeated. You had Florida repeat in 06 and 08 under Urban Meyer. Now USC, remember you had that split title in 03. So USC won an AP title in 03, and then they won the BCS in 04. So I guess really we had 3 multi-year champions, but because there was a split title there, we still had 8 different national champions. That's the first. There was just a lot of variety in the way the seasons ended, and I know how much you guys love that. I'm not against it either. We had some classic games. That 05 Rose Bowl, I didn't even really think about talking about the individual games. You had Tebow. You had the emergence of Urban Meyer as a great college coach. You had the emergence of Nick Saban as a great college coach. You had Mack Brown win his national championship. You had Bob Stoops win his national championship. Bobby Bowden won another one. But also, think about this. Think about the sport reaching its apex. The 1990s were a great decade. But what the 90s did is it kind of slingshot the sport into the 2000s, and there was a massive investment on the part of television, and the television product came a long way in the 2000s. Coverage of the sport immensely grew in the 2000s. You could watch every single one of your team's games. Also, stadium expansion booms happened in every conference. There was this, because of the influx of TV money, there was an investment in facilities, and everyone started upgrading in that vein. But also, our Casey Cosgrove, who works here and does a great job on the tech side, he speaks words I've never even heard of before. He brought up a good point. Trey Scott brought up a good point. How many times have I said that on the show? Not too many. They both brought up a good point today. Casey said, think about what College Game Day was in the 2000s, and think about what College Game Day Final was in the 2000s. Game Day hit its peak in the 2000s. That was must-see TV every Saturday morning, but College Football Final with Reese Davis and Mark May and Lou Holtz was, and I'm going to put this as kindly as I possibly can, a vastly superior product to what is offered today. And I even know a lot of you who hated on that product at the time retroactively now agree with that and wish you could get that combination back. It was authentic. It just had its own flavor. It had mass appeal, but its own little cult feel to it. It felt like a community. Kind of felt like our show feels. You either kind of get it or you don't, but most everyone got it. And so it was also appointment viewing. My day was not complete. I didn't care if it was 2 o'clock in the morning. My Saturday was not complete until I had watched College Football Final. And they slapped those stickers on the helmets at the end. Then, and only then, had you put a bow on your college football experience. So game day was great there. College Football Final was great. The television product overall hit its apex. The sport boomed at every level in the 2000s. We had great teams. We had 8 different champions. What was not to love about college football in the 2000s? Oh, and by the way, you had the beginning of what has become the greatest dynasty in the history of the sport when Nick Saban arrived at Alabama, but you also had USC run off a little mini dynasty. You had Florida under Urban Meyer win 2 of them in 3 years. So you had several sort of mini dynasties. Then you had the birth of a major dynasty. Also, you know what else sort of came of age in 2000? Online sports betting for college football. Some of you don't care about that, but what you could do in the 90s versus what you started to be able to do, mainly offshore, in the 2000s was a totally different ball game. That, college fantasy, some of you are into that, but betting also really turned a corner technologically in the 2000s. So I went with the 2000s. I know the arguments for the 90s. Like, you're not going to get me to push back hard on the 90s, but the 2000s for me Best decade in the history of college football.